Just before I share my screen, let me just officially welcome all of you for taking the time to be here and also for giving me the opportunity to share the information I'm going to share with you. I really do believe that it's um, empowering, it's inspiring, it's even transformative. And a lot of what I'm going to share has been and is my journey. And this today I'm going to take a little bit of a different slant than I have in the past when we speak about when we have these webinars on health and healing. And I wanted to begin with a testimony that there are a couple of them, but I'm going to just share this one. Last year, I normally have my annual checks done, have my lab work done, for monitoring. And when I had it done, the my blood work came back with my thyroid panel being a little bit off, out of balance. And she palpated my throat and asked if I had no symptoms. But as she palpated my throat, and as she felt this lump, I could feel it under her finger when she was doing it. I could feel it moving under her finger. And when she did that, then I felt the sensation to cough. Well, prior to that, I had no idea that anything was even there. So she suggested I do an ultrasound. I went, I had the ultrasound done, and it came back that there was a 9 millimeter growth on my thyroid. Now, a 9 millimeter growth for the size of your thyroid is quite a sizable growth for such a small gland. And but for whatever reason, I was not aware of it. I became quite aware of it afterwards, and sometimes I would start to cough for no reason because it felt like something was tickling my throat, and I knew that's what it was. Anyway, she suggested that I have a biopsy done just to make sure that there's no abnormal cells in the growth. I opted not to have the biopsy done, and that's when she said, okay, well, let's do an ultrasound and come back in 3 months. And if it has grown even a little bit, I want you to agree to do the biopsy then. I said, okay, if it has grown, we'll do that. 3 months later, I did not go back. I had the ultrasound done, but I did not go back in the 3 months that she recommended because I wanted to give it more time for me to work on it. And by working on it, I didn't do anything specific in terms of taking anything for the thyroid or to shrink the growth. I worked on it internally. And when I say internally, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And, you know, just to leave that there. I went back last week to have the check done, and she asked about if I was giving it time to grow, that I didn't come back. I said, no, I was giving it time to go. So she suggested I do another ultrasound. Well, I did the ultrasound, another ultrasound. She looked at it and it was clear. And she just shrugged her shoulders and she said, So I said, what do you think happened there? She said, well, I don't know. The body sometimes have a way of just healing itself from these things. Sometimes things appear and sometimes things disappear. But I can't really say, but thank God it's gone. Well, I was not expecting it to be there. And I'm sharing that to say that when I was speaking about it after I came back from the clinic and I was speaking to my wife about it, and having heard me talk about spontaneous healing in the past, she said to me, well, isn't that spontaneous healing? Because it had not occurred to me to even think of it in that light. But spontaneous healing, if you're not aware of it, I would recommend that you do a search on it, Google it, because spontaneous healing is a phenomenon in medicine that that happens all over the world. And there are tens of thousands of cases of people that go through spontaneous healing. And spontaneous healing is specifically recorded with medically incurable conditions and terminal conditions. And for some medically unexplainable reason, these people completely recover from the terminal and incurable conditions. And there is no specific thread or one thing that they were doing for that to happen, except it is internal work. There is a doctor, a Harvard medical professor, he's a doctor, he's a psychologist. He wrote a book, and I would recommend that you look it up. It's a book called Cured. Um, and he studied over the last 20 years many hundreds of these spontaneous healing cases. And after going through all the data, he came up with 4 pillars that he said are the 4 pillars that lead to spontaneous healing. Of course, we know that things like diet, nutrition, and these things are all absolutely foundational. But he said the primary pillar upon which it all stands is identity. Now, when he said that, that caught my attention because it's been something that I've been working on and working with in my own work and in my writing. And then he went on to explain that in an interview, he was asked, how does identity play into this spontaneous healing? And he went on to explain, and I won't belabor it, but he went on to explain that the people, because of their critical condition, came to a place in their life that caused them to start to question the value of life, the meaning of life, what really matters, how to reprioritize, to re-examine themselves. And it caused them to take a new direction in their life, but that direction became an inward journey where a new self-discovery of themselves and the true essence of their being. And we are all spiritual beings. And when I speak to people, I've not spoken to anyone that has not accepted the fact that we are 3-dimensional beings and that we are spiritual beings experiencing a 3-dimensional life in this earthly existence. But I also have come to understand from working with people continuously that we don't really know how to conceptualize that and understand that. We just intellectually, we accept that we are spiritual beings having this human experience. But the truth is, when we come to really connect with and understand what that really means, and I'm not saying this in the context of any specific religious thought or system, just the fact that our divine design, how we are designed, and how what that means and how that translates into how we live and move and have our being in this earth. When we understand and we come back to that true essence of being, things like spontaneous healing is something that will happen. And so what we're going to be talking about this evening hinges on that. I'm not going to go through that, but that is the basis of what we're going to be talking about. And so I'm going to share my screen now, and we're going to get ready to happen. This, just before I do that, let me also say that I retired from clinical practice about 4 years ago, after 25 years of naturopathic medicine. Those, I would say, were probably 25 of the most meaningful years of my life. And throughout those years, I have seen lots of things happen that were not medically were not meant to happen in terms of people recovering from various illnesses and so on. I had not experienced anybody going through spontaneous healing, but through working with them, see them recover from many conditions. Having retired 4 years ago, this is now altogether 30 years I'm in the health and wellness industry. I continue to be, I'm passionate about it, but I am now working with people from a different perspective, and that is from our inner well-being. Notwithstanding the fact that you cannot eliminate things like nutrition, exercise, hydration, and all the other physical factors. It all works together. But what we're going to be talking about this evening is, I believe, the fundamental core and perhaps one of the biggest missing pieces in the whole equation, that if we can get what we're going to talk about, and I understand with the limited time, we could just only really, you know, look at the whole framework and the concept of it. But as we get to understand it more and more, this is life changing, not for just sickness and disease, but for every other area of our life. So let me now share my screen. Okay, so wholeness, the truth and future of health and healing. And that title may seem to suggest that the truth, as suggest that maybe we didn't have the whole truth before, but um, truth, of course, the truth of this is coming, speaks about coming to the very root, what I believe is the very root and the very core of it, with the understanding that wholeness is really our highest state of being, and it is the essence of our true identity. Now, I have a quote here that really comes out of the statements from the World Health Organization that says approximately 30% of adults globally intentionally and consistently engage in holistic lifestyle habits at least 3 days a week. Now, think about that. The majority of the world do not engage intentionally and consistently in healthy lifestyle habits. And the statistics, if you look at the article, the statistics that are the worst is actually the United States, has some of the worst statistics of all. But it also says to us how much we would say to ourselves that health is our most valuable asset. People say health is your wealth. People place high importance on health, but how we actually go about engaging living doesn't necessarily reflect that we really do believe that. We may intellectually accept it's important, but we don't really believe the importance of it because most of us don't intentionally engage in it in the ways that we ought to. And so, as a result, we have what the World Health Organization calls the global burden of disease, where lifestyle diseases, these are chronic conditions that comes out of the way we choose to live. It has become a global pandemic. Well, it's been a global pandemic for many years, far greater than the pandemic that we had a few years ago, that over the space of the 2 years, I think like 20 million people died from it. But with this global pandemic, every year 50 million people are dying from lifestyle disease. And the thing is, the percentages are increasing. And so my question is, if our understanding and our approach to disease is correct, and given the remarkable advancements in medical technology, should we not be seeing a decline rather than an increase? But yet we are seeing, and why they call it the global burden of disease is because every country on the planet, it is the biggest budgetary nightmare of every government that is suppressing their economies is this thing called healthcare and disease. The statistics are there. And so why is this getting so out of hand? So obviously it's a very important subject to approach. And why is it that we would think so highly of its value, but not really engage it? And then when we do get sick, because based on these statistics, 7 out of 10 of us, we are going to develop a lifestyle disease. Most of us are going to suffer with it over years. It is going to deplete our capacity to earn, deplete our savings, and it's going to take us down. And the last remaining 10, 20, 30 years of our life will be lesser and lesser quality. Some of us may be fortunate enough where it may just hit us and take us out very quickly, but most of us are going to go gradually by this. This is so common that we now think it is normal. And I want to really emphasize common does not mean normal. In fact, we are not even designed to be sick. The very design, the human design, our triune design, when it's in order, we're not even designed to be sick. So much so that when we do work on bringing it into order, whatever sickness we have, it goes away. Now, that is remarkable, and that's where we want to go with this. So, according to the major authorities, stress is the number one cause of disease and dysfunction. So, the Center for Disease Control in the United States says that up to 90% of doctor visits are stress related. Stress is the basic cause of 70 to 90% of human illnesses and disease. Over 90% of disease is caused by stress, thoughts, and beliefs. And the World Health Organization, the American Psychological Association, and the Mental Health Foundation in the UK says between 60 to 80% of people in modern society live in chronic and recurring states of stress. That's how we live. We've heard it. Life is stressful. This world is stressful. But the thing is, I want to shed a different light for us to look at stress, not in a negative light, but in a positive light, because stress is really not the culprit. It is, we are perceiving it this way because of the vantage point in which we are looking at health and every other malady that we have in life. And just so that we're aware, what we call stress that contributes to sickness and disease, the very root of it is exactly the same thing that's causing our relationship problems, our financial struggles, our social conflicts, and social polarizations that's happening, the moral decline of the moral fabric being ripped apart in society today. It's all the same basic cause of it. Sickness and disease is just one aspect that comes out of it. And so if we can get a handle on it, our focus this evening is health and healing. That will be our focus. But just so that we are aware that the principle applies to every other area in our life that we may want to prioritize or we may want to improve. So I'm going to just create an analogy for our understanding of, I'll call it the tree of life. And in this tree, it has branches, and it can have many branches, but I've listed here, we can call it our authentic identity, our purpose, health, meaningful relationships, financial security, benevolence, freedom and legacy, but we could have many branches. The thing is, this tree is rooted in a soil that when it's properly rooted in the right soil, the nourishment that comes from that soil through our essential nature of spirit comes up through our soul, which is our heart and our mind, which is what navigates this side, and through what our conscious awareness, our consciousness. I'm not going to get deep into this, but I want us to be aware of these three things as it relates to our inner well-being. Our essential nature is spiritual, that's energetic. Out of that flows what navigates life externally, our heart and our mind, our conscious and subconscious mind. And it is driven, it is fueled by, it is powered by what we can call, what I'm going to call consciousness. Consciousness is our awareness that we exist and that we have life and that we are engaged. That consciousness, I'm going to link that to our spiritual awareness. Why? Because when the time comes that this body ceases to exist for whatever reason, we will still be aware of our existence, maybe in another dimension, in another reality, but we would still be aware that we still exist. That is consciousness. So consciousness is relative to our spiritual nature. I want us to be aware as well that we are not conscious because we are alive. It is because of consciousness that we have life. It's not our life that makes us conscious. It's our consciousness that gives us life, because that comes from our spiritual nature. So what happens now is, if we think of it this way, the soil, that the roots, our spiritual nature is the roots of the tree. When the roots are planted in the right soil, and I'm going to call this soil just omnipresence. And I'm leaving this is neutral. Omnipresence just simply means the everywhereness of what we call God. That omnipresence. And I'll call that infinite consciousness, simply because we are a reflection of, we are the image of, we are the likeness of that consciousness. And since our spiritual nature in this human flesh is our conscious awareness, we'll just call that omnipresence, that everywhereness of the divine, we'll call that infinite consciousness. When our spiritual nature is connected to the source from which our very being comes, then all that will flow from it, the branches, the leaves, everything that will flow up through that will be optimal, will be perfect, will be at its best. This is really where wholeness comes from. And wholeness, when we live this way, it is about our life being in resonance, our conscious awareness, how we are aware of this life that we have. It has to be in resonance with omnipresence. Omnipresence is within and it's all around us. We are breathing omnipresence. We are walking through omnipresence. It is everywhere. The thing is, our consciousness, the essence of our spiritual nature, needs to be in resonance or in harmony with omnipresence, because that is the soil. When that flows that way, everything works in order. But what I want us to understand here is that we may have health issues. And the reason why I highlight authentic identity and health is because the two are relative as well as all the rest. But we are focusing on health this evening. But we may engage in some activity, or we may seek help to improve our health, to improve our relationships, to improve our financial positions in life. We may do different things and seek different avenues, and we treat them as though they're all different aspects of our life. And while they may be different aspects, they're all branches of the same life, the same tree that all comes from, that are connected to the same roots. So what I'm saying to us is that when our life resonates correctly, and I'm telling you not what I think or what I have learned, I'm telling you what I know, because it's been the engagement of my life. When our conscious awareness, our heart and mind, our soul, is in resonance with our true essence of being, the branches bear fruit, and the fruit are sweet, and the fruit are plentiful, and the fruit is abundant. So that if it is our financial area of our life is suffering, and our relationships are suffering, I want us to be aware of this. There is no area of our life that we can optimize unless we're optimizing all. If we try to optimize one to the detriment of another, it will collapse. It will come up, it expresses itself one way, as sickness and disease. The body, which is our connection into this physical reality, is where it shows up. That's sickness and disease. So this is the concept that I'm going to be building up from. How we have been conditioned by the world to understand and to look at life, understand ourselves, and how we are conditioned to look at life is the opposite way. Our identity really has been conditioned by the world, and we call it an egoic identity. But the soil that the tree is planted, the tree of our life is planted in here, which has been acculturated by the world and our upbringing, our experience, etc. That soil really is an illusion of separation. And because of how we identify with it, it's about the pursuit of pleasure, possessions, and self importance. It's a fractured way of living. And what comes up, the roots that are planted in that soil, it creates a fractured life as opposed to a whole life. And because it's dissonance as opposed to resonance, our life is out of sync and out of harmony with our true essential nature. So I'm not, and please don't make this, I don't want to make this is not a religious thing. This is saying that we are spiritual beings and we are meant to live from our true essence of being as spiritual beings. We have just not been taught and understand how that's supposed to be. What happens now is that having been acculturated by the ways of the world and the perceptions and understanding of things of the world, which is external reality. We are conditioned by external realities. We look on the outside for value, but what we're doing, what we have done inadvertently, is that we have inverted the order of life. On the left side, life flows from the inside out. That is the creative order of life, and that's the principle of life. That is spiritually, in all these spiritual wisdom and traditions, is the same thing. Life flows from the inside out, from the invisible into the visible. But the world has taught us to invert that, and rather than from inside out, we take our value of life from the outside in. That is what creates the fracture. It creates resistance, and that resistance creates dissonance. Think of it this way: there is a natural flow and order of life, and we can see it in a seed that becomes a tree. If we take a seed and we put it in the right environment, all things in order, that seed, inside of it, there is an intelligence that nobody can see, measure, and it begins to put out a shoot, it begins to create roots, it pushes above the ground and it begins to grow. It's a process called, the science is called involution, where an invisible essence is unfolding this structure that was encoded in that seed, and it becomes a tree and it becomes fruitful. What I want us to understand is that this divine flow of life, it works in the cosmos, it works throughout nature, it works for everything that has life. Everything flows from the inside out. Now, that invisible essence, that invisible power that unfolds the seed into a tree is exactly what brought an egg cell in the womb and unfolded it. So, science today, we can map what's happening in the womb, but we don't understand how a cell knows what to do, how it knows how to do what it's doing. It just does it. Where's the intelligence coming from? That science can't touch that. But that's what we're talking about, is that the very essence that unfolds that, the intelligence that unfolds that, the flow of that, that is the creative order of life. We have come into a world that has conditioned us to flip that order to where the value of life comes from the outside in. And what that does, it obscures our true essence of being. And so we learn to live from the outside in rather from the inside out. That is like going against the flow of a river. It creates a resistance, and that creates dissonance and a fractured way of living. The result is life becomes a struggle across the board in our life. What I'm going to tell us now is that I'm put together is the principles of, in this case, recovering from whatever condition it is you have, and to prevent disease and to live a healthy life. This is all part of what we're going to be talking about. But the bonus is that as we do it, we'll find that other areas of our lives are going to start to improve as well. So To understand it and um, get a handle on it within the context of that stress is the number one cause of disease and dysfunction. I want to just put it into context is that understanding this divine flow of life that flows through us, it is what's animating our bodies right now. It is what keeps us consciously aware. Our consciousness, however, just becomes obscured from its spiritual essence because we have inverted the order of life. But we exist in two opposing realities because the entire structure of creation is built on opposites. There is day and night, there is light and dark, there is north and south, up and down, above and below. If you remove opposites, creation will disappear. Creation is constructed from the very atom, protons and electrons, up to the very matter that we see and the environment we live in. Everything is built on opposites. But when the order of life flows according to divine design, opposites coexist in harmony. When we invert it and we create resistance, they take on their individual characteristics. And being opposite in nature, it creates a conflict. But the conflict is not because opposites are meant to conflict and be in a disagreement or be different. Conflict only arises when the order, the creative order, is not right. But everything in creation, including our bodies and us as a community, supposed to live in harmony because that's the design. The fact that it's not happening doesn't speak to its design. It speaks to the way how we engage because of how we understand it to be. So we have the invisible inner world, that's thoughts, emotions, beliefs, etc. And this is where we experience life. We have the outer world, which is the environments, our relationships, our work, and so on. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that we think that we are experiencing life on the outside. We don't. We experience life only one place, that's on the inside. Outside is where we engage, that's where life is expressed on the outside. And we engage in our work, we engage in going about our daily lives. This is where we do stuff, this is where the doing of life happens. The inner world is where the being of life happens. The outside is where the doing of life happens. And sometimes we can get confused between the doing as being, but it's not. The doing, all external, that's where we take the value from. And so it becomes that if life is to work for us and life is to be successful and we're to be prosperous, we got to do and do and do and do more. But when life is driven from outside in based on doing, life is always harder. But when life comes from the inside out, which is the creative, the natural order of it, doing becomes almost effortless. Now, you cannot know that from intellect. You can only know that from experience because they're two dimensionally distinct worlds that we're talking about. And it's only when you put it to the test and you try and engage the principles that we're going to be talking about in the workshops that will follow this, you'll get to see, wow, life works. So much so that I can boldly say that life is designed to work for us and never, and I mean never, against us. So that when it looks as though it's even working against us, you can be sure it's not working against us. Even though it appears that way, it is just steering us back on course. That's an understanding that we'll get. And so we have these two worlds that we live in. Now, I just want us to get the distinction in our minds that the experience of life, because what enriches life is experience. If you take away experience, we're like walking dead. There's nothing happening. So Experience is what gives us the enrichment of life. And that comes from the inside, not from the outside of doing. And that's where we want. Now, we are meant, although we live in two opposing realities, we're only meant to have one experience. If we are having fluctuating experiences, it's because our lives are fractured and we're unstable and we're not going to be effective in the way we live. But it's meant to be one experience, that is, when it flows from the inside out, the two opposing realities become one. So if we want to really enjoy the best of life, we are such extraordinary beings that if we want to have the best that we would allow ourselves to have, and we reorder the flow of life from the inside out, we'll see how everything begins to work so well for us that it is just amazing how it works. So the goal is not to escape the challenges of the outer world that we call stress, because we think that stress is the bills, and we think that stress is the job that is tough, and the traffic we have to face, and the attitudes of the people we got to deal with, and we think that the outer world is where the stress is. It's not. The experience of stress is all internal. It's all happening because of our thoughts and emotions, our beliefs, it's all connected to our identity. And so I understand when Dr. Whitaker says that identity is the number one pillar for spontaneous healing. I really understand what he's saying. And so when it comes to, we want to have the best experience of this life. We want to know what it is to have unshakable peace, overflowing joy. We want to live with gratitude. We want to be happy. We want to be exhilarated. We want to have a great life. We want to have life where we don't even know what a bad day is. Is that possible? Of course it's possible. But if we live from the outside in, life is always going to be a struggle. And so what we call stress, which is the number one cause of disease and dysfunction, our focus for this evening, when we talk about stress, understand that stress is not what's happening out there. It's not what's happening around us. That's just life happening according to law. Life only happens by law, not by chance. Nothing in life is chance. Everything is law. And life is just happening. How we respond to what's happening, that is purely based on what the state of being of the inside is. Entirely based on our inner state. It determines how we're going to respond to what is presented to us on the outside. In fact, we need to also be aware that what transpires on the outside and how life unfolds and the expression of it on the outside is entirely dependent on the inside. And that is not just for health, that is relationships, that is financial success, that is prosperity in all its forms. It all comes from the inside out. And so this inner experiential reality, I want to focus in on our thoughts and our emotions, which is the guidance of how it translates into what happens on the outside. You see, because our thoughts do shape our perceptions of reality. And when they're rooted in truth, it helps us to see through that inner lens of the spirit. But when doing flows from being, our actions are the natural expressions of our inner attunement. Everything works flawlessly for us. We intentionally create the reality we want, and life works for us perfectly. But I just want us to be aware, the point that I would like a light bulb moment is that inner world, we know it only through resonance. You cannot know it through intellect. Resonance meaning it is because it's not material, it's energetic. You only know it when there are two frequencies. That's what resonance is, two frequencies that match. But our inner nature, which is spiritual, it resonates with love, truth, peace, gratitude, compassion. That's what it resonates with, and that's what changes the perception, the lens, the thinking, the whole response to life, and ultimately what the expression is on the outside. And so we can create the life we want when we return to this. Every emotion is preceded by a thought, conscious or subconscious. And a lot of us, we're not aware of our subconscious thoughts. The moment we think a thought, it carries a vibrational frequency, and that frequency either attunes or discords it with our divine nature within. Our emotions then reflect that alignment or dissonance. Emotions, I want to focus in on. When our thoughts and emotions resonate on the other side, fear, pride, shame, any kind of negativity, guilt, unforgiveness, resentment, anger, frustration, that is the outside in. It creates that dissonance, it creates that fracture. And I'm going to take this up to where we're going to see how sickness and disease comes in and how we can turn it around. So that experiential reality, think of emotions. Emotions are like the tuning forks of our soul. You get a tuning fork, you get two tuning forks of the same pitch, and you hit one, the other one, even halfway across the room, will start to resonate because they're the same frequency, the same vibration. And so think of emotions like the tuning forks for the soul. When they vibrate either in harmony with our spiritual life, which is love, truth, peace, and those positive things, or it resonates in conflict with it. Emotions serve as a sacred purpose for in defining resonance. So when we go through our emotional states, and we're going to see how emotions play in right down to the cellular function. When we go through whatever emotions we're going through, good, bad, or indifferent, they are our signals. That's part of our inner equipment to tell us whether we are in resonance or whether we're in dissonance. It's not, and so we have to start dealing with emotions in a very different way, also in a very positive way. Emotions are just echoes of our thoughts. If our emotions are in dissonance, our thoughts are in dissonance. And if that is the case, you cannot avoid sickness and disease. It's just a matter of time. You cannot avoid relationship problems. You cannot avoid financial struggles. I'm telling you, this is where the answer is right now. You want to get those things in order? Our thoughts and our emotion has to be in resonant harmony with our essential nature. When thoughts are rooted in truth, they echo the frequencies that will create the very life we want. See, when we say stress, the opposite of stress is a life of peace. But the peace of spirit, which is really unshakable, meaning that it doesn't matter what happened around you, it doesn't move your peace, it doesn't disturb your joy. That's why I say you don't have a bad day. But that peace that is unshakable, that confirms to us that we are walking in resonance. And so understand that our emotions are not things to belittle or to look down on. Our emotion is part of I think of it as a spiritual GPS system. It tells you where your thinking is at. It tells, and your thoughts are what's gauging your direction, where you're going in your life. Your emotions are echoing and confirming if that direction is right or wrong. And it helps us to be able to navigate this life and make our choices more effectively and more efficiently. So you can think of it this way, that consciousness is the power source. It is like the battery. This is our spiritual GPS system. It is the inner source. It is that life that animates. It is what makes life function at all. It is the divine and the eternal. It's never disconnected from its source. Our true essence of being, our spiritual nature, is never ever disconnected from omnipresence. It just may not flow through because we have inverted the flow and created a resistance. This is the simplicity and the ease that life's supposed to have. When we revert it and we bring it back into its natural order, it just naturally begins to flow and things begin to happen in life. So our thoughts is the navigation input. So think of it as a GPS. These are like the addresses you plug into your GPS. Our thoughts is what's going to determine how the direction of what's going to manifest in our lives. They determine the direction that we're moving forward, either in alignment or not in alignment. The emotions, these are the alignment indicators. Like the GPS, they're recalculating and they're alerting you when you're on the path or when you're off the path. That's how we have to look at our emotions. Use them as a gauge. See, when there's peace, joy, love, we are en route. When it's anxiety, fear, and frustration, we need to recalculate. The GPS is recalculating. That's what anxiety and fear is. It's saying recalculating, recalculating. We need to redirect because we're going in the wrong direction. And AI, which I adopted from a colleague, she calls AI authentic intelligence. This is the sacred intuitive knowing within us. You see, from the inside, when we live from the inside, that's we receive. We receive directly from the flow of the very intelligence that build worlds. We receive the wisdom and the intelligence that flows from that when we are connected. That's authentic intelligence. When we live from the outside in, outside is what we perceive, inside is where we receive. And I'm saying to us, this is how we can, when we begin to reorder that inversion and start to live by our truth, understanding our divine design, we'll see how life is gonna turn out. What is stress? Stress is the conflict that arises when our soul is out of alignment with our spiritual nature. Stress is not what's going on outside. It's how we respond to it based on this misalignment. It is the symptoms of inner dissonance between how we are designed to live and the life we have been conditioned to live. The distance between those two. When our thoughts contradict the flow of divine order, when our actions oppose principles of truth, and when our identity is drawn from the external instead of the internal, we are going to experience what the world calls stress. Now, the world looks at stress and they treat stress like it is a disease in and of itself. It is something to be managed, manage your stress. It is something to be controlled, control your stress. It is something to be suppressed. That is a wrong perspective. Stress is not external. Stress is all, it emanates internally. It is the dissonance, the conflict that exists between. I made a list just before we came on here. If I could just quickly read to you what stress looks like. Because when we say stress, we are so conditioned to think it's outside. Stress is the disconnect between who we truly are and who we pretend to be. It is the disconnect between what we believe and how we behave. It is the disconnect between what we need and what we are pursuing. It is wanting peace, but keeping rehearsing what people have done to us in the past. It is valuing truth, but hiding how we really feel. It is desiring confidence, but still striving to prove our worth. It is thinking one thing, but saying another. It is needing validation, recognition, and acceptance in order to feel good about yourself because we are living by a false sense of self. It is feeling one thing, but doing another. It is making resolutions and giving up on them. It is wanting to be healthy and not changing our habits. It is knowing what is right to do and not prioritizing doing it. Stress is the disconnect from our true nature that creates this fracture inside, and it is what's going on inside in conflict with what's going on outside. And that's what we call stress. So we need to shift our thinking that stress, which is the number one cause of disease and dysfunction, is not something that's going on in the world with all the wars and all the things that's happening in society that we say this is a stressful world. It's a stressful world because we are all living out of alignment and out of balance. And it's simple principles, just simple principles of truth, starting with just being true to yourself, living your truth. And then there's some principles which we'll teach in the workshop of how you align that. But when we start to engage it, guess what starts to happen? Not only you start to feel better in your body, not only you start to feel your thinking starts to become clearer, but you'll start to see how things start to shape up differently inside your life. Now, what is the gateway to bring it home to disease now. The gateway that brings it into and transforms stress into disease is our central nervous system. Why? Because the central nervous system is the gateway to experience. If you shut down our nervous system, we have experience. We only have experience and experience this thing called life because we have a sophisticated, highly sophisticated central nervous system, which is the brain and all the nerves together. We call that the central nervous system. And it actually is the bridge between our consciousness, our essence of spirit, and our body, the invisible and the visible. The bridge between that is the central nervous system. It is the hardware that takes all the intelligent instructions that built and runs the body automatically. It takes those instructions and sends them to every cell and every organ and every system in the body automatically through the nervous system. And this is very important for us to understand because the central nervous, having our nervous system at its optimal is central and it's key. Now, here's the thing. The central nervous system is divided into two branches. One you call, and you don't have to get caught up in the technicalities of it. And if you want to get a copy of the video to go over it, you can do that. The two branches is, one is the sympathetic nervous system. That's a branch of the nervous system that deals with stress. The stress response, when that is activated, when the sympathetic nervous system is activated by chronic stress, it leads to every kind of physical and mental disease. It's just a matter of how long. There are some auxiliary factors, but this is where stress leads to disease, is because the sympathetic nervous system, which responds to stress, and based on research, most people's this sympathetic nervous system is always in overdrive. It's always active because consciously and subconsciously, our thoughts and our emotions are forever ticking, even in our sleep. It's ticking on the negative side. Everything is in overdrive. So our body is producing adrenaline, it's producing cortisol, it's producing inflammation, and all these things, and it leads to all cellular destruction. Let me just throw this in. Every thought and every emotion, this is based on epigenetics and psychoneuroimmunology, quantum biology. Every thought and every emotion is a frequency that is released, and every cell in our body receives the frequency from every thought and every emotion. And when you put it into a sympathetic nervous system that is jacked up because of stress, what happens? The immune system starts to shut down. Inflammation begins to develop. Things start to slow down, and the stage is being set for disease. That's one side of it. So what gives us the experience of life, the sympathetic nervous system, the stress response, for us is always jacked up. The other side of it is the parasympathetic nervous system, which deals with healing and recovery. When this system is activated, the mind and the body, because the mind is what's transacting and navigating, the mind and the body is always in coherence. It's always in harmony. It's always in balance. There's that inner peace. It restores homeostasis, optimum function of the immune system, cellular function. Everything becomes so synchronized and coordinated when the parasympathetic nervous system is dominant. But for that, and that's where healing and recovery of any and everything happens. The body is designed to heal itself from any and everything because our true essence, which is spiritual, it is 100% pure, 100% healing. It is perfect, and it keeps our systems in order if we can get that essence to come through. For it to come through, our parasympathetic nervous system must become dominant. For that to become dominant, we have to look at our thoughts, our emotions, and how we are engaging with life, that we would have more harmony, peace, and tranquility in our lives, and that means a whole renewing of our thinking. So, is it simple? The process, the equation is a simple equation. The engagement is not necessarily simple. But the function, how we can measure this, is that the function of our whole central nervous system is measured by brainwave activity. So when the stress response is engaged, our brainwave activity is very high and it's reflecting low vibrational frequencies of thoughts, which means fear, worry, guilt. Whenever those emotions are prevalent, it causes very low energy emotions. Those low energy emotions robs every cell and system of the energy to function. And that is on top of creating inflammation, oxidation, and the other chemical factors that lead to disease. But when the parasympathetic nervous system is active, the brainwave activity of those type of emotions are so high that it elevates the functions of everything. I'm trying to just simplify and say that so that we can see the difference between when we live from the inner or the outer, when we live by stress or we live by peace, that our body directly correlates it through the central nervous system, which is the gateway to experience. And so our lives can either be good or not good. It could be healthy or not healthy. And so much so, this thing is so perfect that even if we did not have the best diet and we were not able to afford the best nutrition, and maybe we were incapacitated in a way that we could not get enough exercise and we could not do all the physical things optimally, we could still be disease free just because of this system. We flip it the other way. We could have the best diet, the best supplements, live in the gym, do all the physical factors, have them all in order. But running on a sympathetic nervous system, you're still going to get sick. It may just take a little bit longer to get to you, but it will still get to you. So all that to say that this is coming from the inside out. So disease doesn't happen to us, it happens through us. The condition of the body is determined by the spiritual life that animates it. And what we have to learn now is the difference between identifying what is ego and what is spirit, what is true self and what is false self. So, to reverse the effects of stress induced disease, we have to align our thoughts, emotions, and actions with truth, starting with being true to yourself, which in itself is a practice that a lot of people have to discipline themselves to. These are the very same practices that I've been going through. We have to elevate the parasympathetic nervous system, which naturally happens when we go towards more spirit led life. And when we do that, our brain waves, which is what measures what state of being we're in, when those shift down to those peaceful, calm states, which elevates the parasympathetic nervous system, healing naturally begins. We don't have to know how to heal the body. The body heals itself. It's naturally designed that way. That which built it and runs it, maintains it, heals it, keeps it in order. Homeostasis, and it would not even get sick if you were to keep it optimal, which in today's world, granted, is a tall order today. But it is in our hands. It is not, healing is not in a bottle. It's not in a doctor's office. Don't get me wrong. I go and I have my annual checkups done. These are things that you have to be sensible about these things, but understand that the responsibility is in your hands and it's in my hands. And we have to understand how that works. Now I want to introduce you to something that will help us to bridge the gap. I came across a technology some months ago and I started using it. And I'll tell you, in 30 years, being in the healthcare industry, 25 years of clinical practice, I have not come across anything as mind-blowing and as effective to help us to streamline this mind-body harmony, to bring back that coordination, to harness inside, because the process is we must renew the mind, we must renew our thought patterns, we must renew our habits. We have to engage a process of reordering and living from the inside out. People who have been trying to do this, they find it difficult to bridge the gap Why? Because our brains have been wired to sympathetic nervous function. Our brains are wired to thought patterns and emotional responses that we have learned through our living experience, that nobody has to tell us how to be angry. Somebody says something, we don't think, I think I'll get angry. We just get angry. It's programmed. Somebody says something to us that we don't like, we don't have to think, I'm going to get offended. We just get offended. It's all programmed in the brain. And so the brain waves are associated with that. So if we can actually alter and synchronize the activity of the brain, because the brain waves reflect the activity of the mind, if we can harness that and bring that into balance, all of a sudden, two things happen. We get a better functioning body because it starts to align the parasympathetic system, and we get a more orderly function mind where we find that our thinking, our decision making, our response to life starts to become more in order. Now, that to me is so transformative. And so I bring up this guy, Thomas Edison, who created the light bulb as we know it. And why I brought it up is because when this was introduced and into homes back in the 1800s, it took 50 to 60 years for people to accept, to culturally accept this paradigm. Here it was that a new technology, beside all that people knew was open flames, candles, oil lamps, and this new thing came along, and people saw it as just another option to what was already available. This technology I'm going to share with you, people are going to see it in the same light that, oh, it's just another option to what is available. What is available? Medicines that you ingest to affect the biological change. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about harnessing the inner capacity of our bodies, the same thing that brings about spontaneous healing, which is from the inside out. The same thing that initiates what we call the placebo effect, which is all the mind streaming to the body. It's all from spirit to body through the central nervous system. We're talking about what inherently exists, but is being blocked, how to open it and release it. So what I'm talking about is this new technology. It is not like anything. In fact, there's nothing else that's like it or works like it. And the thing about it, as Thomas Edison also says, the doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his patients in the care of the human frame, in diet, and the cause and prevention of disease. That first sentence, the doctor of the future will give no, this technology that I'm going to tell you about, it requires no equipment. It has no frequencies. It has no medicine. It has no substances. It has no ingredients. It has nothing in it. It is completely medicineless. Which means it is so safe and non-invasive. And it taps into the very thing that prevents disease, because it taps into the very thing that maintains health, which is our central nervous system being in harmonious balance, because the frequencies that come between mind and body are back in harmony. What that does to us is beyond um, what we call wellness and health. Physical wellness and health is way beyond that. It was developed by this man called Jay Dhaliwal. He's the co-founder, the CEO and founder of a company called the Super Patch Company. I have come across and I've used multiple patches in my time. But when I heard about what he was doing, and I was told that this thing actually, this is not a transdermal patch, and it has no medicines, and it has no ingredients, and it has no substances, but it has this type of impact, I needed to know how this worked. But when I started, part of my investigation led me to understanding what he created was to try and solve a problem that his mother had. From the time he was a young boy, his mother had multiple sclerosis and neurodegenerative problems. As he grew up and became a man, he became very successful, and he searched the world for a solution for his mother's problem. only to hear from the neurologists and the neuroscientists that for some reason which is unexplainable, the signals cannot get from the brain to the muscles, and so she's just wasting away. She was supposed to be dead a long time ago. She's still alive today. Because along the way, after 15 years of research and development and working with the most brilliant of minds in neuroscience, he discovered the code. He's a software engineer, and he discovered the coding within the brain and the mind, how the mind works and the brain works, and he discovered something that links them together without any types of medicines. I'm going to show a video where he does this, about a minute and a half, where he does a demonstration. Then I'm going to explain to you how that works and the value that it brings to being able to harness realigning our inner well-being so that we can not only experience better physical health and healing of our bodies, but we can also now have a better platform for renewing the mind and reordering things from the inside out. He calls the technology vibrotactile trigger technology. And so I'm going to just play this minute and a half video for you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jay Dhaliwal. I'm the CEO and founder of Vox Life and the creator of Vox Life HPT. Today, I want to talk to you about a Harmony Neuro Patch. And what this product does is actually stimulates receptors on our skin, sending a neurosignal to our brain to help it reach homeostasis. This is the only product in the world that relies on the neurohaptic system that every single one of us has to optimize our neurology and optimize our health. Today, with the help of Dr. Mark DeBrinket, our VP of Clinical Strategy, we're going to be using an FDA-cleared 19-channel EEG headset, as well as FDA-cleared software to visualize, record, and show the impact that our technology has on our neurology and our brains to help it reach optimal performance. What we want to show today is how the Harmony Neuro Patch helps that dysregulated yellow, blue, and red colors in the brain maps transform into that healthy green homeostasis neurology that is the foundation of health and wellness. So what we're looking at right now is a neurological QEEG output of Mike's limbic system. The 19 channels are reading over 60,000 brainwaves a second and generating an output of neurofunction and brainwaves. What we want to see now is where that suboptimal red and yellow colors are. We want to see them turning as much as possible to a healthy green with the application of our HPT patch. So we've applied the patch now to Mike's arm, and within 10 seconds, you're seeing that predominant yellow and red become predominantly green. Just for clarification, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing in the world that has this output at this rate of speed without drugs, without chemicals, without electricity. That's the power of Vox HPT. So when we see a healthy green neurology, what we're looking at is a brain and a mind in homeostasis. It is operating in its optimal function. And this is so important. And this is why it's so important. So Vox Life HPT, as we demonstrated with our neuro patch, helps the central nervous system reach homeostasis in our neurology. And the reason this is so important for overall wellness and health is that neurology is the top of the pyramid of our physiological health and wellness paradigm. First is neurology at the very top, then there's chemistry, then there's biology, then there's physics and mechanics. Neurology will have an impact all the way through our entire physiology. Healthy neurology, healthy body, better wellness.
So let me just quickly point to a couple of things that he did in the demonstration. He's measuring 60,000 brainwaves a second. We have millions of brainwaves happening every second. But brainwaves, when we measure brainwaves, you're really measuring the activity of the mind. Brainwaves are a reflection of the mind and also, by extension, our state of being. So when our state of being is calm, it's poised, it's collected, it's centered, our brainwaves activity will reflect that. When our state of being is anxious, unsettled, fearful, etc., our brainwaves also reflect that. So when we measure our brainwaves, we're measuring our state of being. Now we understand that our central nervous system, which is what's running everything inside the body, that responds to our state of being. So if it is On, as we saw, the sympathetic side is going to lead to illness eventually. If it's on the parasympathetic side, it maintains health, balance, healing, restoration, homeostasis, everything works in order. So we want to live more on that side, but we have been conditioned in such a way that we now have to renew our thinking. We have to develop different thought patterns. We have to learn how to respond differently to things, but it all is a matter of changing our perspective. Now, therefore, you're changing your mind, or we are renewing the mind. But how do we renew the mind? Apart from engaging in habits and practices, meditation, prayerfulness, mindfulness, etc., if we can get the erratic brain waves that are normal with the average person who is living in a sympathetic dominant state, if we can balance and bring them into harmony and balance, it automatically starts to bring the body into a state of balance. So the body begins to function better and it does what it will naturally do, which is heal, repair, recover, etc. But when you balance the brain function, you're also enhancing mental function. And so it has very far-reaching implications. So here's how it works. How is it able to do this without any ingredients, any medicines, any chemicals, any frequencies? How is it able to do it? To understand it, I'm just going to bypass these two. You have to understand it works like Braille. Braille, which blind persons use to read, there are these raised dots on a surface. What we have to recognize is that there are specific receptors that are embedded in the skin. They're called piezo ion channels. They convert vibration and texture into electrical signals and it sends them to the brain. We also have to be aware that everything in the universe carries a vibration. All matter carries a vibration, and we are vibrational beings. How people are able to read Braille is that they arrange the dots in what they call tactile patterns. And when your fingers touch the pattern, it sends an electrical signal to your brain with the information as to if it is a A, B, C, a 1, 2, 3, a symbol or a number, whatever. The information is embedded in the pattern. In a very similar way, Superpatch has created what they have been able to discover after 15 years of research and development is when brain waves are not properly synchronized. And what caused them to not be synchronized? The frequencies of thoughts and emotions that are contrary to our inner nature. The thoughts and emotions that are contrary to our inner nature, it creates like static. And so it's like a radio not being properly tuned on the station because there's static, and that static is contrary frequencies of thoughts and emotions. So if we can bypass the static and synchronize the brain waves into their normal harmony, the body will naturally do what it will do because it's governed by consciousness flowing through mind, through nervous system, and it just runs everything and keeps everything in order if we can synchronize it. What Superpatch has been able to do is discover what pattern will send what frequency or what signal to the brain that will synchronize the brain waves that will then streamline it to the body. That's what they've been able to do. Very simple, clean technology. Peel and stick it on your skin, and instantly it starts synchronizing your brain waves. So, vibrotactile technology, after 15 years, it has now become peer-reviewed and published research that is now gaining attention and attraction across the globe. It's major medical and peer-reviewed journals. They're now talking about it because there's never been anything that could have this type of impact physically and mentally on the human being that is not introducing any kind of substance into the body. What it's tapping into is your divine design. It's tapping into what already exists. It's tapping into, and it's just enhancing and bringing more online the healing potential that already exists inside your body. And so it's working with your divine intelligence that runs the body, that keeps it, it's working with that. It's not, so it's not it's not like an option to what is available. There's nothing that works like this that's out there. And so unlocking that mind body communication. So when the mind and body becomes harmonized through brainwave synchronization, biological functions become optimized as the mind becomes more attuned. What? Attuned to its inner nature, which is harmony, balance. As their function becomes more coordinated, homeostasis returns and healing is a natural response. The patches do not heal symptoms, they do not heal conditions. The body is designed to do that, provided it's in balance, provided it's in harmony, provided its inner nature is in homeostasis. And so the patches help to bring that alignment back. The Super Patch Company has so far discovered 12 ways or 13 ways of how they can synchronize brainwave activity to specific neural pathways in the brain that it becomes so coordinated that it will bring about certain enhancement functions in your body. But more than that, when you use them in combination, it then creates greater synchronization of brainwave activity that creates even more phenomenal experiences that's now going even deeper beyond physical well-being. And it's all natural. You'll see what I mean in a minute. But mind-body solutions that we all need. It's safe, it's FDA registered, it's 100% drug-free. It's all backed by science, proven by research. It addresses some of the most common healthcare issues, but not to just see it that it's a healthcare tool that we may be dealing with certain symptoms and we could use it for that, but not to think that this is a medicine for a symptom. It is not. It is simply synchronizing brainwave activity, which brings back online the flow, the divine stream from consciousness to body, bridged by the central nervous system. And the body naturally does what it has to do. There's no contraindications because there's no ingredients in it. So despite what medications you're taking, it's very safe. It's non-invasive. It's easy to use. Children can use it. The elderly can use it. I've never come across anything in my clinical experience that is so openly safe, and it's a non-transdermal thing because there's nothing inside the patch. So when it comes to maintaining a healthy neurology, rewiring your brain, and this is the key. Super patches, the long game of it is you can stick on a patch onto your skin and it can go anywhere on your skin, no particular place. You put it on your skin and it begins working, and some things you'll get almost immediate results or immediate effects. Some things, depending on the person's individual, your body may have to work through certain imbalances. But here's the key to it. When we use these patches and it starts to synchronize the brain waves and bring them back in order, the brain begins to rewire itself to the new order because it has been wired to disorder. It has already been wired to the bad habits. It's been wired to the bad thought pattern. It's been wired to the emotional responses that we've had over the years. It now has to dismantle and rewire. So the brain, what it called neuroplasticity, the brain begins to rewire itself and retrains itself to this new balance. And when that starts to happen over time, not only your body increasingly becomes better and better, but what also happens is that you find that your mentality begins to shift. Your temperament begins to change. Your disposition begins to change. All of a sudden, you're stuck in traffic and wondering why you're not getting upset like you used to. All of a sudden, you have a deadline to meet, and where you would normally be anxious, and you find that I don't understand why I'm just not. I'm just calm. I'm not getting anxious. All of a sudden, you find that You have some very quick decisions to make, and you have a clarity in your mind that decision making just seems so fluent. All of a sudden, your brain is starting to work better. You're not getting perturbed by the children running all over the place, and you're more patient, you're more tolerant. All that is more orderly functioning brain. What does this mean? This means we can now reorder. We can now flip. We now have a platform where we can now reorder the flow from the inside out. This is not just about physical wellness. This is overall well-being. So this is a wonderful tool to help us on this journey there. So I want us to see past physical well-being. It's more than that. These are just to go through some of the um, indications of the various patches. I think this one for sleep should be. I mean, billions of people have sleep issues and they don't even know it. But sleep, REM sleep, is where our body does most of its repairing, replenishing, and rejuvenating and restoring, including fixing the brain, cleansing itself and regenerating itself. All that happens during sleep. This is a very, very important thing. The peace patch is one of my favorites. You're feeling stressed, you're feeling anxious, you put on the peace patch in a matter of minutes, you feel centered, you feel calm. This balances the autonomic nervous system. This is so critical. This is the system that runs everything in our body that for most people, based on research, is always out of balance. This keeps it balanced. This keeps our composure and our mentality in a very good place. The defend patch, I have not come across anything in my clinical experience that enhances and supercharges the immune system as fast and as strong as this does. Pain, pain reduction varies from one person to the other, from within seconds to minutes to hours. Imagine this, and it's not masking the pain, it's removing the pain, not masking it like we do with painkillers. Joy, when people are feeling depressed, they're in a low mood, and this is not, you don't have to be feeling in a low mood to take the joy, because the joy regulates the neural pathways in the brain that are lit up when you're in a spiritual and transcendent state and you are euphoric and your heart is bursting with gratitude. The parts of the brain that light up, joy lights that up. So if you want to feel connected, you want to feel that inner connection, just take in joy. You don't have to be depressed to take it. It's something that you can just take. And I certainly recommend that for people. People who are into athletics, into performance, into sports, you use the victory. Let me tell you, no question about it. I've not had anybody that don't feel the difference. And I'm not talking about you don't have to wear these patches for a period of time for them to start working. You go into the gym, you put on the patch, and right away, you'll feel the difference in your workout. Focus, enhancement, memory, attention, concentration. And again, you don't need to have mental cognitive issues to use this. This will just help to retrain your brain in a way that you can actually prevent cognitive decline. Apart from just, for me, I find it sends my creativity. My creativity, I feel, has become just so much more open since I've been using this. Those who want to burn off those extra calories and they can't get enough activity, you burn more calories at rest. You want clean energy without having these harmful energy drinks and excess caffeine, etc. This is clean energy that's coming from the inside. You want healthier skin, more luminescent glow. You have maybe some skin issues that you want to overcome. The Lumi, excellent for that. Kick It, this is an amazing, amazing patch. This is not just for people who want to overcome habits and they find it difficult to get past these habits. This is not just over food addictions or substance addictions. This is people who have addictions to overthinking, people who have addictions to fear and to worry, because we have a lot of addictions that's internal and we don't know mental and emotional addictions and we don't know how to break it. This helps to quiet the limbic system and the other parts of the brains that are where these habits are emotionally encoded. It regulates all that and it brings it right down. So when you know, and when you combine the patches, you get even greater effect. For men who we tend to lose our masculine function as we get older. This will help to pick you up in that area. And then synchronizing the power of them when you use certain patches together, the brainwave synchronization and entrainment that begins to happen. Um, the brainwave activity takes us down into a place of such almost into a transcendent state where we begin to function and tap in to our inner essence of being. These things are just phenomenal in how they work. And so I found that this is a good tool. My journey has been always been to work on my inner well-being and how we do that. And I know the struggles that I and many people have as we work on our inner well-being and to bring it into alignment. And the hardest thing is crossing that river of renewing the mind and retraining our brain. This becomes a tool that helps us to be able to harness that, creates a platform where we could actually cross that bridge with a whole lot less effort and with a lot more ease in doing it. The result is your body begins to work better because that's natural part of balance, and your mind begins to work better. In all, you're looking at a better quality of life. They're very simple to use. Each batch lasts 24 hours. I'm not going to spend any time on that. The medical advisory board supports the research and development team out into the real world. They all are doing clinical testing with all of them. By the way, the patches, they have clinical trials, they have clinical research, they have all the neuroscientific studies there. So they're all scientifically validated and backed by that. So I'm doing this just to invite you to consider taking on life from a different level and the patch to help you in the process as it has helped me and it's helping other people to do it. That's something for you to consider. So we have a Facebook group, a Facebook page you can go to, Patch and Go. Thousands of testimonies from people all over the world that their lives are being impacted in ways that are like astounding for some people because it's beyond what medicine can really do in many, many cases. And so you want to start feeling better, you want to start thinking better, and you want to start living better on a holistic level. I'm suggesting to you, consider what we talked about today. Stress being the number one killer, the number one cause of sickness, disease, and dysfunction. That understand that stress is not the enemy. Stress is a signal to that is pointing us in another direction. It's a signal of dissonance, of misalignment. It's a signal that we are not tapping into our true essence of being that we're supposed to be living from and living by, that ensures that we will have the best life possible once we bring those principles in alignment. And in a little while, in the next couple of months, we're going to be introducing workshops that goes along with some of these about how we actually engage the practical and dynamic steps of how we employ it in our lives. This is just the principles of the framework. So for those of you who want more information, you have questions, you can get back to me or whoever might have invited you on. And on Monday evening, I'm going to have a session where questions can be answered then. If you want to come on to that, you can just request the link. And I could tell you more about what Superpatch as a company, how Jay Dhaliwal, with his mission to help to impact the world and to bring change to the world through this technology, I will tell you about how he's going about doing that. And I have joined his efforts. Maybe some of it's not for everybody. Maybe somebody might be interested in joining the efforts, but it becomes a financial opportunity for those who may want to consider that. I'm going to be talking about that on Monday, but also answering any questions that you might have had from tonight. And it could be on anything we have spoken about, including the technology that we talked about. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for taking the time, for coming on, giving us the opportunity to share this with you. I really do hope that you've heard something that will provoke your thinking in such a way that you will begin to re-examine, rethink how we've been going about engaging with our lives, and consider the super patch as part of a tool to help us to live a better quality of life in every area and on every level. So with that, I'm going to say good night and thank you very much. And perhaps I'll see some of you on Monday evening.